I'm very sorry. I don't know. I was muted. My apologies on that. So I said last class we talked about Azure DevOps generally, and we talked about the CI/CD pipeline, and we talked about the CI, what the CI actually does. We talked about the CD, what the CD actually does. We talked about the policies around Azure DevOps. We talked about the security measures. We talked about the variables and many other things again in Azure DevOps that we spoke about. I think we have a brief background of the whole concepts of what these repositories do, and I talked about the interconnection between these repositories. For instance, how to connect between Azure DevOps and GitHub, and how to connect between Azure DevOps and different other repositories like GitLab, Bitbucket, and so on. I showed physical examples of that. And also, I talked about the CI pipeline. I talked about the classic method, and I talked about the YAML method. And also, uh, please, I'm coming. I'm trying to just mute my surroundings. We are back. Sorry for the disruption in transmission. So so we talked about generally about Azure DevOps and so on and so forth. I believe that I have dropped the link for the Azure DevOps class we did last time. I dropped it on the group. Please, I want us to take out time to watch the video. You have the ability to pause and play the video so you can be able to get some things out. And also, if you have questions as regards to it, you can send me the questions on the group. If you want to speak to me personally, you can also speak to me personally on it. And I believe we'll be able to answer many of those questions together and be able to build ourselves in terms of being a DevOps engineer, and not just being a general DevOps engineer, just being a professional DevOps engineer. So today I'll be talking about GitHub and GitHub Actions. So I think that's what we raised on the group, and I'll be sharing my screen more on my browser so you can be able to see it. Okay, firstly, I'll be dropping a picture on this group chat if you can see it. So the picture is, oh God, I don't know if they allow me to. So I'm not seeing the ability to upload a picture. Maybe I'll drop it on our DevOps group. So we can see it together. Please, you guys to confirm to me if you sorry, please, downloads. Okay. Yeah, I've sent the picture. So when you open the picture, you'll see the CI/CD process and so on, everything about DevOps kind of. And you can see that we have you have your build. I'm starting from the left hand side to the right hand side. You have your build, you have your code, you have your plan, and you have your tests, you have your release, deploy, um, operator, and monitor. So two things majorly here. You see CI. CI is the ones on the left hand side and the CD on the right hand side. Please, I want us to confirm. You can just unmute yourself
Sorry,
and just let me know if you can
no,
see the
sorry,
picture.
quick one.
Yes, sir.
Can anybody see his screen because I can't? I'm only seeing GitHub actions.
No. Oh, I dropped the picture on the group. Oh, let me share my screen on to show the picture. So,
You are
sorry, please. I'm coming, please. I just want to open the picture on my system. I I am having it here now. So okay. So can you see my screen? Please, I
Yep.
want us to confirm. Can you see my screen? Okay, good.
Yes.
On the left hand side, you have your CI, and the right hand side, you have your CD. Please just note those things. Do we get it? Note those things. For now, I won't want to give you an overload on everything. But one thing you can take note majorly on your code on the left hand side. On the code, you have Git, GitLab, GitHub. Do you understand? You have Git, GitLab, and GitHub. I will talk about everything virtually on all our classes, and we are starting with the code essentially, so for us to have a good understanding on it. So last time we talked about Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps fall under the code aspect of it. You understand? I thought I explained about the repository and so on and so forth. As you can see, GitHub also gives you that repository kind of thing. GitLab also does the same thing. Bitbucket also does the same thing, and some other some private repositories also they does the same, they do the same thing. I mean, so in terms of your code, keeping your code in a repository, and you can read up on Git. I'll try to get a link for Git details on Git and drop it on that group so we can all read through it because most of the things we'll be doing here is giving summary of these things and drop the links for you to read because knowledge is power kind of. So you need to read up in all these things. So it's not everything that we will have time to explain and break down one after the other, but we are going to be able to give a good understanding of it. So read up, we'll drop links on the group, read up on those things, and we come to classes and explain those things, and people can be able to ask questions. Thank you very much. Also, firstly, okay, let me start with GitHub generally. So, uh, somewhere in our heart, all of us know what GitHub is. Meaning that it's a repository whereby people keep their codes. I'm going to be sharing my own repository now, so you can see how it is. So, so let me share my screen. Can you see it? Can you see my screen and my GitHub repository? Please, can we confirm that you can see it? Hello, please. If it's you can, okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you very
Yes.
much for the feedback. So you can see this is GitHub generally. You can sign up to GitHub. It's just github.com and you can sign up. It's a free platform virtual for everybody, but there's an enterprise part of it. Do we understand what I'm saying? So like last time when I spoke, I said Azure DevOps is kind of an enterprise thing. But GitHub on the other hand is it has a free version that anybody can use, and it has an enterprise version of it that is majorly for that enterprise. I would have wished to explain more of this enterprise thing, but maybe if you can understand the generalized one, is kind of understandable, and we can move with it. I think that's fine and good. Okay, so this is GitHub generally. I have my people that I'm following, I have people that are following me, and the things they have done, and so on and so forth. And it's a good thing, so you can be able to have a full understanding of what people too are doing, that kind of thing. And also, I'll move to repositories. So in Azure DevOps, last time we talked about the repositories. We gave details about how the repositories look like in Azure DevOps. But in GitHub, on the other hand, to view your repository, you have to just go to your profile under your where you see your picture or your profile. You can click on your repository. Can you see it? Mm, yeah. So this is my repository. JBravo I. That's my name there, and details about everything I have done in my GitHub repository and everything I have, the codes I have, and so on and so forth. It has been years, and that's how it is, kind of. So this is just to give you an overview of how GitHub literally looks like. nothing new. It's something that you can access even if you are just coming into tech space. Just open a new GitHub repository and register into it and set up your profile and so on and so forth. You get a dashboard like this. With time, you'll be able to move and process every other thing. So now you can create a new repository if you want to. Like for people that are starting up in tech, for instance, let me just use this time to just give you a glance through how it works. So creating a new repository, you just go here, go to the right hand side, and you click on new, and it's going to bring up a page, details of the repository name, description. If you want to add a README file, do you want it to be public or private? And so there are some other things. And after that, I can click on create repository. Also, look at this thing here that I just picked here. You see, grant your marketplace apps access to this repository, meaning that if I want Azure DevOps pipeline, you'll be able to pick things from my repository and build and deploy. I can just put that in here and so on and so forth. Now let's move on to the aspect of the code. I dropped a link on the group chat initially before our class, and I talked about um, so this is what we'll be talking about majorly. Yeah, so I'll be talking about, okay, this is a repository that I have on GitHub, and what I really do in this repository, I have codes. I think majorly, I think they are Terraform codes that I use to build container apps. We are going to come to that and talk about container apps and so on and so forth. But for now, I just want to give you an overview of how GitHub really helps to do. So in Azure DevOps, I showed you how the repository looks like, how the codes are stored, and so on and so forth. But in GitHub, this is how it really looks like. This is the visual display of it, and these are the branches. So I have only one branch in this. I'm virtually the only person using it, and I can create tags and so on and so forth. And this is my branch, and my GitHub workflow. I'll go to that. These are the folders I have, and there are information in each folder. For instance, in my let me open this. In this folder, you can see I have the Terraform file. Here you can just for you to view. Uh, have Terraform codes I wrote in there, and my variable files and so on and so forth. So that's that. Maybe one of our classes will talk about Terraform, but for now, I just want to show you how things are stored in GitHub repository. So this is it majorly, and also because of our time, we have to move on to pipelines, GitHub pipelines. So in Azure DevOps last time, I explained that we have our CI and we have our CD, meaning that one aspect of it builds the code, the other aspect of it deploy the code. And I explained, I said we have our classic method and we have our YAML file method. But in GitHub, we don't have classic method. Please, do we get that? Classic method means that you just drag and pull. You understand? But in GitHub, reverse is the case. Everything is in the YAML file. So these are YAML file, our build pipeline. We can call it build and release pipeline. I'm going to go to that. And we have everything we do in GitHub action, for instance, is code. It's not drag and drop like Azure DevOps classic method. So that's one. And also in terms of separation, GitHub doesn't have that separation where you separate your CI in your the pipeline. There are pipelines for CI, pipelines for release. In GitHub, they don't do that. You just use one single pipeline. And if you don't want to use a single pipeline, you can use something called templates. I'll talk about that later. But you can have a pipeline file that calls other pipeline files, which are called templates, to perform actions. So that's about that. But majorly, the they use just one pipeline file and they are good to go. That's for GitHub. So for instance, now in GitHub, you have your code, issues, pull requests, and so on. Take notice you have one major thing called actions. That's what they call GitHub actions. So I'll just click on this so you can have a view of it. I think I used to have something. Okay. I have not built this one yet. I think it's been a while. I think it has removed. Okay. So it's been a while I've built this code on GitHub Actions, but I just want to show you how GitHub Actions really look like. So on GitHub Actions, you have let me see if I can get one that has a full display of things. Please just hold on. So for information purpose, so can you see how the workflows look like? Do we get it? So these are things that are done, codes that are built, and so on and so forth. So when your pipeline phase, you have your cancel, and when your pipeline is successful, you can see the mark sign. So that's how GitHub Actions really look like. So now I will just go straight to explain the YAML file. So in YAML file, you see something under the code. Firstly, let me go back to the code so we can be able to view it together. You have one folder called .github folder. Under that folder, you have another folder called workflow folder. So under that workflow folder, you have your pipelines. Do we get it? So this is a pipeline file, for instance, that I created for this particular job. So what this pipeline does is to build my code that I have in this particular repository. Do we understand to this extent? This pipeline, what it does is build this code in this particular repository. Function or tags in GitHub that allows you to build code from a separate repository. I'm going to get the tags for you. I did it in one of my projects, and I will explain that later. So what our tags does is that it allows you have your pipeline or your YAML file in this particular repository, but that YAML file, during its process of running, it calls other things in other repository or different organization and so on, and can pull it into your code and build it together. So that is for that, but most of the time pipelines are majorly meant for that particular repository. Yeah, that's number one. Okay, so starting from the YAML file here, this is how GitHub action works. You have your YAML file, the name of the you have your name in there. So if I build this code, for instance, it's going to show me the name. So this is the sorry, let me just cancel this so you can have a full screen. Okay, you have your it's so this is a trigger. Look at on this. Once you see an on, means that at what point what triggers this pipeline or this YAML file to start functioning. So this is a trigger for it on this and that. The pipeline will be triggered and start building. The next thing again is environment. So environment here is talking about like variables. You understand? I'm going to tell you how I reference this environment at the later part of this YAML file down here. So for instance, I have my environment infra directory. I've given the value for it and so on and so forth. The resource group is test and storage account name and so on and so forth. And also the my variable file, this variable file is talking about a particular variable, and I'm saying this variable file is stored at this blah 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 blah. So that's it. Now when I mean output, so this one is just Terraform stuff that we talk about when we have a class on Terraform. And also note, this place you are seeing something like called subscription ID, and in front of it I am putting a parenthesis and saying secret dot subscription ID. Good. I know some of you want to ask a question that why am I having secret dot something, and there's no actual value for it. So I'm just going to show you something now. So duplicate. So in every repository, uh, every repository has its own security, has its own settings, and has its own variable secrets kind of. So for instance, when I click on settings, yeah, you see that when you scroll down here, you have something called environment. You see it. I can state my environment to either be a dev environment or my environment to production environment. What this thing means is that depending on the environment that I am building at that particular time, the pipeline is going to use some particular variables. For instance, if I'm having a particular YAML file, that is this YAML file. Can you see it? I can use this same YAML file to build for dev, for pilot, and for production environment. Please, do we get that concept? But you know that the credentials I will use in dev environment will be different from the credentials I will use in the pilot environment, and it will be different from the credentials I will use in the production environment. I can now separate that in the settings called environment and say, okay, I have a new environment. I want to configure this environment. This environment should be dev environment, and so on and so forth. So it comes in with its own variables. So once I need to build the pipeline, it's going to ask me, which environment are you building for? For instance, I'm saying I'm building for dev environment. Once I say I'm building for dev environment, it will pull the variables that are meant for dev environment. Please, do we get that? So that's about that. And the next thing we want to talk about is secrets and variables. So under the secret and variables, major one you need to do is just actions. Yep. So now I was talking about secrets and environment initially at the upper part. Please, I want us to record that. So now I can create secrets based on environment. Can you see it? I can create secrets based on environment. I told you initially the secrets that are meant for dev environments will only be used when I'm building for a dev environment or I'm building and release for a dev environment. And the secrets are meant for pilot will only work for pilot environments. While the secrets meant for production will work for only production environment. So I use these environment secrets to manage all my secrets. Please, can you see this aspect? Now, we now have another thing called repository secrets. Repository secrets that are meant for the repository, the pipeline. You understand? Pipeline meaning that the pipeline for this whole repository. For instance, these secrets I'm seeing here, secrets.subscription ID, is a secret that is meant for this pipeline. It's not based on a particular environment, be it pilot, dev, or anything. This is majorly for just building the pipeline. Do we get it? So anytime this pipeline is running and it gets to this place and it says secret subscription ID is equals to secret.subscription ID, it will go to this part of the secret. It will go to this secrets folder, check the variable called subscription ID. For instance, I'm creating a new secret called subscription ID. This is a new a secret called subscription ID. I just put my subscription ID here and so on and so forth and so forth. Thank God, just for explanation sake. And I just click on add secrets. Once I've added this secret, I can't even view the value of that secret again. The only thing I can do is just to update the secret. I can't view the value. Do you understand? So that's about this. Another thing again is that I can delete the value of that secret. Delete that secret. Somebody's mic is unmuted. Okay. Somebody tell me to mute Nonso. Nonso, please, can you mute yourself? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we can set is a value for my. I can update my subscription ID meaning that I can just click on this edit button and update the value of the subscription ID, but I can't come here to pick the value that I've already put in there initially. Please, do we get that? So that's the difference between Azure DevOps. In Azure DevOps, for instance, when you have a variable, you can go and check the value of your variable, except you lock it. Once you lock the value of your variable, even you cannot open it. So that's it. But in GitHub Actions is a different ball game. Once you can save your variable, you can't even view it again. It can only be viewed during the pipeline process. Maybe you just cut or you output the value. That's on that thing. Now I've talked about variables. So the same way you do it for subscription ID, you can do it for client ID, all these other secrets, and so on and so forth. Like for instance, you can see agent VN password. So it's a best and ideal method for you not to put the secrets of your or credentials of your applications in your YAML file. Please don't do that. As a professional, you ought to put your credentials and secrets in variables. You understand? You can use secret variables and different kind of variables depending on what you want to use. Also, now while talking about the variables, I talked about so this first aspect is talking about secrets. Can you see it? Now there's another thing called variables. Variables are just like these normal secrets that you see. For instance, creating a new variable called subscription ID. Subscription ID, blah 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 blah. And add variable. Can you see it? You see the variable called subscription ID and the value. Can you see it? So now see this thing, subscription ID and the value here, and compare to secrets. Yeah, you can see secrets on. I can't see the value. I can just see the value name, but I can't see the value. But in variables, I can see the variable name and but and I can also see the what the value. Can we see the difference? Yeah. So it's just like in Azure DevOps, which I mentioned initially. It's just like you having a variable and a variable value and locking it. Once you lock that value, it becomes a secret. Do we get it? But in when you unlock that value, leaving it unlocked, it's just a normal variable. So that's how it is. But majorly, credentials ought to be saved as secrets, please. Okay. Next thing you have these are all we call jobs and tasks and so on and so forth. Just like we spoke about it in Azure DevOps. So in Azure DevOps, we have something we call stage. You understand? You have stage, you have tasks, you have templates, you have steps, and so on and so forth. So in Azure DevOps, majorly we use in Azure DevOps, majorly we have different. For instance, if I'm using Azure DevOps YAML file and I want to create a new task, I'm going to see this thing on by the right hand side here, like a task that assists me to help in which kind of task I want to create. For instance, I want to create a task that updates, write a bash script. For instance, I can come here and click on it. But in GitHub Action, you have to know your task yourself and write it yourself. So that kind of assistance that you want to talk about, you may not get it kind of in GitHub Actions. But I'm going to explain something around it. Some of the things I learned in GitHub Actions also on how you can be assisted during the process. Yeah. So now the next thing I stopped at jobs. So jobs, just like me saying I have a stage, and so in this job, the job name is Terraform plan. So let me come here. So in my Terraform plan job, I sorry, I commented out all this thing that are down here. So you need something. So it runs. This runs on. What it means that which kind of VM do you want uh, which is needed to run your job. For instance, a Linux VM or a Windows VM or a Mac OS VM. based on the kind of job you want to run. Do you understand? So this one is dependent on you and the kind of job you want to do. And the next thing needs, so many of these things here are things that you talk about based on what you want to do actually. So next thing we have steps. So steps are just like tasks in so steps to after steps you have tasks. So you have tasks are things you actually want to do. So now, for instance, you have a task here where I put this name starting from 32 to 36. You have Azure login. Can you see it? So Azure login is a task that allows the VM to log into Azure. You understand? That's we'll talk about Azure and so on later. And next thing we have another task called replace token. So this replace token is replacing the variables in a particular file. For instance, the file that this thing is replaced on is called, okay, sorry, the file is not in this folder. So this is the file it wants to replace token on. And so how replace token actually work? For instance, this task, I'm just using my time to explain it, is for instance, in a app settings file, you have a value and you have a variable. For instance, you have my name is equals to comma is equals to hash hash uh, name. In my pipeline, I've updated it as name is equals to John. Do you understand? So anytime this pipeline runs, it goes to that file, that particular file, update where it sees name, and put in my name, John, into it. So that's what this task actually does. Please, do we get to that extent? You can ask me questions about it maybe after the class so I can explain this particular task. And the next task we have here is just Terraform installer. That's means installing Terraform uh, on that particular VM that's running the code. And the next thing is Terraform init. We will talk about Terraform in one of our tasks. And but this is how all the tasks looks like in in Git in GitHub Action. Can you see how the tasks are? So after that, you can create other stages like some pipeline have. Let me show you this. No. Okay, let me show you this for instance. No, sorry. Okay, so this one is not being used again. So in this pipeline file, for instance, you can see that you have a task called a job. This job, this job up here is to build the code. Can you see it? And you have another job called deploy. I'm coming, please. Okay, sorry. So you have another job called deploy down here. Can you see that there are two different jobs? So the first job here is to build the code, and the second job here is to what? Deploy the code. So this is what I was explaining initially when you have your CI and your CD inside the same YAML file. Is we get that concept? So you have one part of your code building the code, and you have another part of the YAML of that same YAML file deploying the code. So now, for instance, let me show you how it looks like once the deployment is done. Or once the process is done, let me look for one. Okay, this one failed. I'm trying to get one that you can use. Okay, just look at this. Let's look at this for instance. Please, can you see build and deploy? So under your build and I think the logs is no longer available. It's over. I'll try to get one that is recent. So you look at how all those stages look like. I'm coming, please. Let me get one that's recent. All these ones are old. Last year, November 2024, last year. I'll try to get one that has the build and deploy image, and it shows you a build process at the left hand side and the deploy process. So once that build process is done, it deploys the next stage. But in Azure DevOps, you can separate it, meaning that you have a separate pipeline that does a build, and you have another separate pipeline for deploy. And also, we talked about approvers in deploying in using Azure DevOps. For instance, when you build a code in Azure DevOps, that doesn't automatically mean that your code is going to be deployed. Do we get that? In Azure DevOps, it gives you the option of uh, adding approvers to your deployment pipeline, meaning that I need my manager to approve, I need my seniors to approve, I need someone to approve before that code can be deployed. But in GitHub Actions, kind of, there's a way to set approvers also. There's a particular task that does that it confirms those details, and once those details are fulfilled, it now does the other stage, meaning deploy or anything the other stage can be. Please, do we get that concept? So in GitHub Actions, in this case, you write it as a code. But in Azure DevOps, you can just it's a drag and drop kind of system for build and deploy. So that's the difference between GitHub Action and Azure DevOps. I've kind of explained. So when you get to an organization and their organization uses GitHub Action instead of Azure DevOps, so you should not be surprised. You understand? You can do almost the same thing you have in uh, Azure DevOps in GitHub Actions, but in the GitHub Actions case, you kind of need to write it in code, meaning that you need to understand writing YAML codes and so on and so forth. And so on. And lastly, again, I want to talk about building. I was talking about building a new YAML file. You understand, a new workflow, so you can see how it actually works. Like in Azure DevOps, I said that we have a task in the left hand side, meaning that when you edit a particular task, you can click on the task on the left hand side and it's published. It just populates your task for you. But in GitHub, you have to write it kind of in the code. So looking at this new workflow, for instance, you can see you have a simple workflow. You have deploying different kind of node workflow. You understand? It builds that, it writes the code for you. You just need to just pick up that code and configure it to what you want to do. Do we get that concept? For instance, this deploy Node.js to Azure Web App. Once I click on it, it's going to bring me a list of workflow, like a kind of semi-complete workflow. Can you guys see it? You see normal process, blah, 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 blah. So this workflow, what it does, this workflow does is that it builds and deploy everything I need, kind of. So you market this thing, set up a distance, blah, blah, blah. So you can see it's not that rich in compared to Azure DevOps. But if you can understand the code, you can be able to get it done. For instance, that same Terraform code that I was using as example, if I want to use GitHub, like I'm new to GitHub or the GitHub Actions, and I need to just create a new pipeline for building my code, like they just gave me the repository, go and build a pipeline for this and deploy it. Don't be scared. Just come to Actions, click on New Workflow. It's going to give you suggestions. So for instance, it's a Terraform code. Just click on Configure. You understand? Configure. So it's going to give you a template that does build and deploy for Terraform. For instance, you have you can see it has given you some examples and so on and so forth. Here you have Terraform. It is building on this thing on master branch, and because that's the only branch that is there, you can see details and so on and so forth, the steps, and initially this the Terraform token, Terraform init tags. Can you see this? Uh, Terraform format, Terraform plan, but you can't. You have your Terraform apply at the end of everything. So when we are taking the Terraform class, we'll talk about that. But for now, you can see how to use GitHub assistance to create your workflow file. So it's kind of what do I call it, easier that way, instead of you sitting down to crack your head and know that, okay, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do. So you should not be under pressure and make mistakes like that also. And also I've talked about using this. So lastly, I'll talk about security. Okay, let me remove this. Lastly, I'll talk about security in that you have policies and so on and so forth about the branch, this particular repository. So so in Azure DevOps, for instance, under the uh, under the repository, you have different option, pull request. I don't have any Azure DevOps here. No, you have pull requests, you have branches, you have repo, and so on and so forth. Uh, and you are able to go to the options of policies, branch policy, branch settings, and so on and so forth. But in GitHub Actions, these are the major things you can get from the security aspect of it. And also, you can set up this if it is needed. You understand? By the organization, you can read up on this. I'll try to get some notes on documents around it and drop it on the group chat also. And also about settings, again, I'm going back to settings. You can change the settings of your repository, I mean, from being a public repository to a private uh, repository. You can change the visibility, you can disable a particular branch, and so on and so forth. These are some of the things you should know about GitHub generally. And you have branches settings and so on and so forth. I'll just glance through it. You have tags, you have rules, actions. I've talked about actions. So under this action, we have runners. So I think I talked about it when we were talking about the Azure DevOps class. I said that runners are VMs or agents, depending on the English you want to use. We have runners are VMs or agents that are used to run your code, meaning that to build your code and deploy your code. Do you understand that aspect? So for instance, if I'm telling you that this particular YAML file that is here, build this YAML file, and where is it going to build on? Know that it's going to be building on the underlying, it's going to be building on an underlying virtual machine. So we have two types of underlying virtual machine, meaning that we have the self-hosted VMs and we have the Azure or Microsoft hosted uh, VMs. So self-hosted means that that virtual machine that builds the code and deploy the code is in-house, meaning that, for instance, you're in an organization and that organization can has its own VM. It doesn't want its code to be in the public space. It will have its own VM in-house. So anytime you want to build the code, it's going to use your virtual machine in-house to build that code. But when you are talking about Azure pipelines, or Azure hosted, it's just going to use Microsoft's own VMs. But that one is pay as you go, kind of. So not that nothing is free, kind of. So that's about that. So you have the runners, the permission of the runners, retention. The I think I showed you guys. Yeah, I said some of them when I try to open it, I am not seeing anything in it. Like I tried to check something, I said, and it's not available. So what happened in this kind of scenario is this retention artifacts, logs, and retention policy around it. Can you see it? Okay. So you have other policies, and you can read through it depending on what you want to achieve. And you have your runners or your agents. You can see what I talked about recently. You have self-hosted and you have Microsoft's own runner. So dependent on the kind of organization you're working on with, I mean, and money being involved, kind of. So the next one is webhook Microsoft Copilot. So I won't want you to bore yourself about this. So Microsoft has Copilot. Copilot is majorly used by um, developers, actually being a developer or DevOps engineer. So when you want to write code on your VS Code or any kind of IDE you are using, so you just install your Copilot with it and GitHub Copilot, and it assists you in checking your codes before your code is being pushed into your repository and built, and so on and so forth. So after that, keys and so on and so forth. So I don't want us to bore ourselves about it. So these are major things I think you need to know about GitHub and GitHub Actions. Please, anybody that has any question, please let's start up with it. Anybody having any question?
Yeah, can you hear me? Good evening.
Yes, I can hear you. Also, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you. Well, I I'm not kind of new to GitHub per se, but I noticed the use cases of every illustration you've given here is basically for Azure and for Azure only. Now, if I wasn't using Azure, for instance, I'm using like AWS, can the codes be transferred for my um production? Can I use the codes here too? Just that's my number one question. And two, are the codes, is it like stateless? Because I noticed from the repo you shared, as in from the Medium link you shared, I can see something on Terraform, yeah, build and deploy on something on Terraform to Terraform code. Is it that it's going to be the same in any time I want to use Terraform? Because I didn't really understand the whole code. There's so many code for Terraform, code for this, code for that. So that was my whole like um wait for questions started.
Okay. So let me just start with this. Your first question, when I'm talking about Azure and comparison with AWS and so on. So to get you right, let me just answer it based on how I understand your question. So I was using this code, this pipeline, for instance. I'm coming. Let it load. So are you referring to this aspect? Log into Azure.
Let me see. No, I mean
Yeah.
the total code that you what you have here now. Is it, can it be
Mhm.
used on another um cloud
Environment.
provider like AWS
Ye-
cloud environment?
ye- yes, sir. It can be
Okay.
used. So looking at the infrastructure that I hear in this Terraform code, I think when I started the class, I opened one of the code for you. Please, can you see this code? I won't talk about this lengthy because we talk about it during our Terraform
Yes, I
classes.
can see it.
Good. You can
Azure
see this code is majorly
API.
meant to build on Azure. Can you see it?
Yes, of course, yes,
This
yes.
code is to
Deploy
deploy
Terraform, yeah.
a Terraform infrastructure, sorry, uh, uh, infrastructure in Azure majorly. If I'm to write it for AWS, the provider here will definitely be AWS. It can be
Yes, I know that.
kind of similar Terraform code writing setup, but the provider and everything I'll be using here will be AWS. So in that aspect, my pipeline will be referring to what AWS, but this thing is going to use the same format. Can you see it? Everything that is here will virtually be the same format. The only thing that will change is that it's not going to log in into Azure, but we're logging into AWS because of my code is majorly meant for AWS. Also, in that same light, if I want to use it for a GCP, I mean Google Cloud, a minute please. I just want to stop the noise, the background noise I'm having. Okay, sorry, please trying to avoid the background noise. Also, in the same light, if I am building an infrastructure, a cloud infrastructure in Google Cloud, for instance, I'll be having my code to be referring to GCP. Do you understand? I'll be having it being referring to GCP, and also the code we're talking about Google Cloud infrastructure and so on. But for instance, here you can see everything here is like, for instance, you are seeing the container app. Container app is not owned by any other person but Azure. You get it? So this code is to deploy container app, and that's, I think that answers the different cloud providers. I think I talked about that. I think one of our class, maybe last class or which class is that, I talked about the different cloud providers. I think maybe we'll talk about that lengthy in the next class we have. I think so. We'll try to check our schedule so we can talk about the different cloud providers we have that are mainly known to everybody. So that's about the first question. And for the second question, if I'm to get you, please can you recap on the second question?
Okay, yeah, tutor. I my second question, I asked about the that I have what I have in front of me here is I can see um different production codes, and
Mhm.
I was just trying to know what are they going to be used for? Like, at what stage are these going to be used? Is it going to be used from the build stage to the production stage and so on? Yeah, because the class for today, gladly said GitHub Actions, containers, containers, and so on. So I think there's just so many things for me. Like, I don't want to know the relationship between everything.
Okay. So
That was my class. That was my question here because the class said GitHub
GitHub
and
and
GitHub
GitHub
Actions,
Actions.
expository pipelines, artifacts, security, and many more. So I was just trying to see the incorporation in all we've been demonstrating
Everything.
now. Yes,
Okay.
boss.
So I actually have spoken about everything. Everything. I don't, maybe you joined early. I talked about GitHub generally. I talked about GitHub Action and the pipelines. I talked about the artifact and the retention policies. I talked about the secrets and variables. I talked about virtually anything a DevOps engineer should know about GitHub and GitHub Action. Please note, it's just me talking about Azure DevOps and Azure DevOps pipeline. So using that same term for GitHub and GitHub Actions. So the actions majorly is the pipeline process, the build and deploy process, CI/CD pipeline, and also uh, in respect to the aspect of the code. I don't want this
Yeah.
code to bore
Sorry,
you.
tutor. Yeah, tutor. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Before you say that, you said the action is in respect to the to the pipeline, or please, I didn't get that.
So I said
You said the git. Yes.
you have Azure DevOps and Azure DevOps pipeline.
Okay, sir.
Pipeline is just CI/CD.
Yes, I know.
Azure DevOps majorly is a repository. So repository is where you keep your codes. You understand? Using the Git processes. Please don't mistake the term Git and GitHub. They are two different things. Git is a systematic process of keeping your codes in branches and a tree version. Maybe you can read about Git. I'll try to drop the link about the story of Git, the process about Git, and so on and so on and so forth. So proud before Git become uh, elaborated like this, they use something called Team Foundation. We talk about that, in that class, but not now. So Git is what a process used in making your pull request, push your code, make a commit, make a stash, and so on and so forth. That's a Git process. But GitHub on itself is a what do I call it? A repository organization, kind of. You understand, where you keep your codes. GitHub initially, prior to now, the thing you do in GitHub alone is to keep your code. You understand? There's nothing called actions. Actions just came up recently. Initially, it was just GitHub. GitHub, where you keep your code, just keeping your code, majorly, and security aspect around your code. Recently, they added actions to it. Actions is just like the process of building your code and deploying your code. Initially, before we started, I dropped a picture. I don't know, maybe in our DevOps group, I dropped a picture of CI and CD. Two things you take notice there: you have your build and you have your deploy. Did you get that concept? So you are building what you
Yes,
have
I
in your
did.
repository. Depending on what you have in your repository, like in this repository here, the only stack you have here is Terraform. In some different repository, you have what? .NET code and C#. In some, I think I showed my repository initially just to clarify some things for you. Okay. So looking at my repositories I have here, you can see here you have a Python code. You see it? Here you have a Terraform code. Here you have a biceps code. Here you have Java code. Here you have biceps, you have Terraform, you have different kind of code. This is a bash shell code. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So your pipeline for each code will definitely be different, but it's still following the same process of pipelines, meaning that you build your code and you deploy your code. So I think that is able to give a brief summary of everything we came to do here today. Are we good? Hello?
Yes, it's good for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Please, anybody with any other question?
Um, yes, good evening.
Yeah, good day.
So regarding the build and deploy, for instance, we have a .NET, like you said, we have a .NET project repository, and in that project, we want to create a workflow, and in that workflow, once there's a push to the master branch, it should build the pipeline and all. And also, for the deployment, how is it going to look like? Because once the pipeline on, it will build the code and it will deploy. But is there a way that we can separate the step in such a way that, okay, just build alone, and whenever we want to kick up deployment, we can come, trigger the deployment, and which is not like Azure, that we can do that on Azure, but on GitHub, everything is stated inside the YAML file. So how can we go about that in GitHub workflow?
Okay,
I'm
so
speaking to separation of building tags and deployment tags. Yeah.
okay, good. Can you see my screen presently? Um, yeah, you can
Yes.
see build and deploy. I think I explained this initially before I talked about security. I talked about build and deploy, but I'm just going to just give a little recap. I think when we post the video, you can go through the video so you can be able to understand what I'm trying to say. Let me try to. I think I had one action here that does that very well. I'm coming. Build and deploy to Azure. Aha. I think this is it. So when you look at this workflow file, you see that you have one task called build. The job. Do you see where I just marked? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Okay.
can.
Okay. So you see this place that I just marked is build. Everything under this build, yeah, like this to this place is a build process. Do you understand? Everything that I just marked here are the build processes. From here, where you see deploy, they are the deployment process. Can you see it? Build process, what the build process does majorly is to build your code. And when it builds your code, it publishes your code as an artifact. Do you understand to that extent?
Yes.
It publishes your code as an artifact. Your deployment process is taking that artifact and deploying it to a particular infrastructure. For instance, this is this in JavaScript code, Node.js. So what it does is that it builds that JavaScript code to an artifact. After building to an artifact, it deploys it to what? To a static web app, to an Azure web app. This is it. You can see that this one is built. This is the artifact name. Can you see it? It's SBH
Yes.
frontend.zip. That's the artifact name, and it is deploying that artifact into this app service web app in Azure. You see the difference? The build does something different, and the release does a different thing on the other side. So while I was talking about it, I said that there is something called security measures. That thing that you do in Azure DevOps, where before you deploy a code, your manager should approve or somebody needs to approve. Do you understand? I talked about that. But in GitHub, in this case, you have to set it as a task. You write it as a code. Yeah, you understand? Where this runs on, it will run only when the deployment somebody has approved, maybe your manager or something, and so on and so forth. So the things that you do in Azure DevOps that you just use drag and drop, click on this, click on that, click on that. In GitHub, in the other case, you have to write it as code. Please, do you understand what I just explained now?
Yes, sure.
Good. So that is how it is. And also, you see these needs that I just underlined here, that I mark out here. This stage called deploy will only work once this process is done in the build process. This build stage, that means everything up here until when it is done before this deploy can work. Do we get that concept? So you can now create another stage again. You can create a stage for verify, create a stage for this and that. But I think I'm going to create a class specially for YAML file. Do we understand? So I will just explain YAML file generally, how things that I have done kind of using YAML files, so we can be able to understand uh, kind of the difference between Azure DevOps YAML file, GitHub Actions YAML file, and so on and so forth. But if you can understand one, I promise you, you are good to write the other one. Do you understand? If you can just understand one. So don't overload yourself with, I need to know this one, I need to know that one, or they are looking different. No, they are not different. They have kind of differences, but they are almost similar in their functions. Please, do you get that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you
boss.
very much. Yeah, I hope did that answer your question well?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, anybody with any other question?
So I wanted to ask, will the recording for the class be available?
Yes, it will. It will. Yeah. And also we have a recording for our previous class on Azure DevOps on the group. You can try to read it through, listen to it through, and if you have any other question on it, in our next class, you can help us to note the questions so I can be able to answer those questions before our class begins. Any other thing? And also, please, I'll be dropping some links for us to read through, just for us to get more information about this. And on that thing again, please don't look at this as rocket science, meaning that where do this come from? I mean it. One of the things that discourage people a lot is like, where do I start from? You can start from anywhere. So you don't need to run to GitHub Actions just like that. You can start with Azure DevOps and be good at it. With time, you'll be able to go to GitHub Actions, and that just depends on the organization you work with. In some organization, they don't use Azure DevOps. They use only GitHub Actions. So if you use GitHub Actions, you are opportunity to learn. My brother, just move on with it. And if you have any questions or any challenge as regards to it, we have a community that you can just chat us up. I'll drop the question in the group, and any one of us will pick it up and respond to you. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, I think we are done for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for the time and for the opportunity. Please, for all the links I've dropped today, please let's try to review it, read things in there, and ask questions. You can note your questions down, or you can record your questions and send to us. Any one of it, we are going to respond to you. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. Okay, goodbye.
Thank you.